Excuse me. Good evening, good evening, good evening. Whew. We're going to pick up where we left off last night. For those following along the book, but as always, for these series, you do not have to have the book. This is why we do this. We're on page 34. We're beginning on July 23rd, 105 days to the election. If you missed pages 1 through 33, they are available on my YouTube. You can click on the link in the bio and you can read it. You can watch it from there. And if you miss any parts of today's, once we are done, it will be uploaded. You do have to give it a few minutes. It takes a while to process because of the length. But let us begin. Once again, we are on page 34, July 23rd, 105 days to the election. The bleachers in the very warm gym of West Allis Central High School just outside Milwaukee were packed. Hundreds more supporters crammed the floor in front of the stage, fanning themselves for some relief from the heat. When the cheering finally died down enough to allow me to start speaking, I told the crowd, "The path to the White House goes through Wisconsin." I would campaign in the state 17 times before Election Day, the venues getting ever larger to accommodate swelling crowds. But this was the first rally of my campaign, my first chance to define the intersection of what Joe stood for and what I stood for, and how, as much as we were alike, we were also very different. With my staff in the prep room, I'd come up with a new line for the speech. Trump's slogan, "Make America Great Again," was very telling. Again. His agenda was to drag America backward. Not a goal of progress, but regression. I also wanted to remind the audience how cruel and chaotic his first term had been. We're not going back. As soon as I delivered the line, the audience, unprompted, began chanting it back at me emphatically. Backstage, Ike, Brian, and Sheila nodded. That works. I'd been trying to draft the speech at home the night before, after Doug, Tony, and I returned from Delaware. It had been an emotional seesaw of a day, the poignancy of Joe's remarks and then the enthusiastic reception that had followed. Mina had stayed on at the VP residence, wanting to be helpful. She also, I think, wanted the girls to experience this moment in history. But my baby nieces weren't all that interested in history. They were interested in making meatballs. I wasn't the candidate embarking on the fight for the future of their country. I was still just Auntie. While I huddled with Tony and Doug trying to work on the next day's priorities, the girls zoomed around the house, oblivious. "What's for dinner? What movie can you watch with us?" It was Doug who gently pointed out that, at this moment, it was a level of multitasking above even my capacity. The girls, he said, would need to head back home. When I left for Milwaukee, they traveled with me in my motorcade, two munchkins flanked by burly Secret Service agents, to the landing zone for Marine 2. I blew a kiss and waved goodbye to them as the chopper rose over the rooftops of Washington, D.C. As I was delivering my speech in Milwaukee, Doug was in McLean, Virginia, for an event that had long been on his schedule, a round table with people affected by the Dobbs decision. held at a reproductive health clinic that had opened in response to the overturning of Roe v. Wade. It was serving not only Virginians, but also rising numbers forced to travel from states with abortion bans. Since Dobbs, Doug had made it a big part of his role to talk to men about why the crisis of reproductive freedom was an issue for all of us, not only women. He was determined to keep the clinic on his schedule to highlight what he termed the post-Dobbs hellscape. Doug was staffed by a tiny team, all that had been necessary for the campaign events of a second spouse. At most of his previous events, there might have been 1 or 2 local reporters. Now, there were scores of national media. As he left the meeting, reporters shouted questions. One asked for his reaction to a remark about me that Trump had posted on Truth Social. Lying Kamala Harris destroys everything she touches. That's all he's got? My Jersey boy shot back. My Dougie. I had kissed a lot of frogs before fate and my best friend, Chrisette, delivered me the amazing Douglas Craig Emhoff, first, second gentleman of the United States. Doug was born into a loving Jewish family in Brooklyn. His dad was a shoe designer, and they moved to New Jersey when Doug was about 5. He had most of his schooling there, and the guys from his kindergarten remained some of his best friends. They're still on a group chat that's active every day. When he was 16, the family relocated to California, and that's where he went to college and law school. Money was tight, so he worked full-time parking cars, waiting tables, and slinging burgers at McDonald's so that he could afford to go to college part-time. Later in the campaign, when Trump put on a McDonald's apron serving fries as a stunt, it was particularly galling. Doug, my sister Maya, and I had all sweated over those McDonald's deep fryers in our teens. I vividly remember my annoyance when I learned that my cousin, who was bagging groceries that summer, made more than me. Meanwhile, Trump got handed $413 million from his daddy, and then his companies went bankrupt 4 times. Chrisette met Doug when he quickly resolved a lawsuit for her family that had dragged on for years. She was impressed by his smarts and his sense of humor. When she set us up on a blind date in 2013, she implored me, "Don't Google him." She was afraid I'd see some corporate headshot of a bland white guy and back out of the date. I was Attorney General at the time. He was a successful law firm partner, specializing in entertainment law and intellectual property. One of his cases centered on who had created the character of the Taco Bell Chihuahua. He was divorced, parenting 2 young teens with his ex-wife, Kirsten. As a child of divorced parents, I was determined to take it slowly. I didn't want to come into Cole's and Ella's lives unless this was going to be serious. Doug, however, already knew it was. "I'm too old to play hide the ball," he emailed me after our first date. "I want to see if we can make this work." We were married less than a year later, with Maya officiating. So much for slowly. Doug hadn't been particularly into politics before we met. He was always a Democrat. He always voted. But like many people busy building a career and raising kids, he mainly tuned in around election time and wasn't deep in the weeds. I'd run virtually unopposed for my second term as AG. So the first year of our marriage was politically uneventful. We were able to take weekends away and do relatively normal date nights. Poor Doug didn't realize that politics is hard. when Barbara Boxer announced she wouldn't be running for senator in 2016. We sat out by the fire pit in the backyard with a big yellow legal pad and wrote out the pros and cons of running for her seat. If I ran, I thought I would be elected to serve just as Hillary Clinton would make history as the first woman president. It didn't go that way, and we arrived in Washington, D.C. to endure Trump's first era of chaos and cruelty. There was good work to be done pushing back against that agenda. I'm proud of holding feet to the fire in Senate hearings, asking tough questions that revealed the nature of Bill Barr, Jeff Sessions, and Brett Kavanaugh. I'm proud that we secured billions for community banks and that we raised federal relief for wildfires to the same level as other natural disasters. And I'm proud that as a member of the Senate Intelligence Committee, we investigated and then declassified our findings of Russia's interference in the 2016 presidential race. But the job was frustrating. As a former AG, I was used to being in charge. I'd make a decision and I'd get something done. Because Democrats were in the minority, the Trump-era Senate sometimes felt frustratingly performative. I yearned for a bipartisan era when senators could reach across the aisle to accomplish real improvements in people's lives. I was lucky to have Doug by my side. It's helpful to have a husband who wakes up with a smile on his face. He's also very protective. Once, when I was giving a speech, a man leapt onto the stage trying to grab the mic. Doug barreled down the aisle from the very back of the hall and shoved the guy off stage. The fierce expression on his face went viral. Sometimes at home, I would see him staring into his laptop with a pained expression, and I'd know he'd found something malicious about me. I'd adopt a resonant voice like a horror movie protagonist warning her partner not to go down into the basement. Don't read the comments. Doug soon learned that American politics isn't built for male spouses. In D.C., there are long-standing social structures and well-understood roles for wives. Not for the very few husbands. While I was a senator, it didn't matter too much, since Doug still had the law firm work that he loved. But the day I got the call to be vice president, he made a huge sacrifice, gladly and without bitterness. He knew it was essential that there be no appearance of conflicts of interest in our new roles. So that was his last day at his law firm. But what was his new role? No one even knew what to call him. I came up with the title Second Gentleman off the cuff during a live interview on CNN. When I got back to the house, he said, "Okay, I guess we figured that one out. Now, in the White House, speak. CGOTUS is an established awkward acronym, just like POTUS and VPOTUS. Since as VP, I was also president of the Senate, Doug became the president of the Senate Spouses, upholding the traditions of luncheons and events originally designed for an all-female association. As the vice president's residence, we've been given an organizational chart showing how the household was meant to function. Under the heading Second Lady, an arrow pointed to family life, which turned out to be a euphemism for housekeeper. While there were naval enlisted aides who helped with household tasks, if I was in the residence, they vanished when I was traveling. Because it was a secure facility, we were precluded from hiring our own outside help. If Doug needed laundry done, he had to do it himself or else hide his clothes in my laundry basket and hope they'd take pity. Since I'm the cook in the family, I needed to make big batches of food and freeze them for him so he'd have something decent to eat when I was gone. After warmly welcoming us into the Biden family at the beginning of the campaign, there seemed to be a change of temperature after the election. Understandably, after all the tragedy they had endured, Joe's first wife and daughter killed in a car crash, Bo's brain cancer, Hunter's addiction, the Biden family was extraordinarily tight-knit. I had always admired Jill for her fierce loyalty to her family and also her dedication to teaching. But I suspect Jill hadn't quite forgiven me for the 2019 primary debate when I'd gone hard at Joe over his early opposition to busing. Although I had regular working lunches with Joe, there wasn't a lot of family socializing. So 3 years in, when we suddenly decided an 11th hour invitation for the two of us to join the Biden family celebration at the White House on 4th of July, 2024, it came as a surprise. We'd planned on being home in Los Angeles, where, for the past 3 years, we'd used 4th of July as a chance to thank the Secret Service detail and the local police and first responders who looked after us whenever we were able to be home. Doug fired up the barbecue, and we personally cooked and served hot dogs for all 200 of them in our backyard. July 3rd is also Doug's father's birthday, a big family occasion. He was turning 87, and at that age, every birthday is precious to us. Because of the sudden request from the Bidens, we had to abruptly change the date for his celebration. The holiday came after a terrible couple of weeks for Joe. In his first sit-down television interview after the debate, he told George Stephanopoulos that he couldn't recall if he'd rewatched it or not. This was supposed to be the corrective interview that would fix perceptions. Instead, it reinforced them. Then, there would be revelations that 2 radio interviewers had asked him pre-scripted questions provided by his campaign staff. It wasn't uncommon for staff to ask interviewers what subjects they would be touching upon, but in his post-debate context, it was damning. The cause for him to step down would reach a crescendo, with Democratic members of Congress speaking out and celebrities such as George Clooney writing biting op-eds. The campaign asked me to call members of Congress to assess support for him. That made me uneasy. I said I'd call only those I knew well, people who wouldn't misconstrue the call as some kind of self-serving fishing expedition. Amid all the chatter, gossip, and malevolence, I never let even those closest to me engage me in the conversation about whether Joe should drop out. I know how this town works. Information is its most prized capital. What you know and what you're prepared to trade are the keys to power. Everyone is in this swap meet. Politicians, lobbyists, the press, intentionally or not. Word would spread that I was passively gauging their support for me, and I didn't want to hear anyone saying to me, "You should run." There was no good way for me to respond to that. For those just now joining us, if you missed the first part that we started last night, it is available on YouTube. Link is in my bio. And when we're done here, once it's available, I will download tonight's live and I will upload it to YouTube as well. So if you miss any parts of it, just give it some time and you can go back and watch it. Unfortunately, due to mass reporting, since we started with this book last night, my gifting has now been suspended. But if you do want to donate to keep things going and help with my ability to buy books like this as they come out, to bring them to you, because I started this series to help out people who can't afford to like keep buying books. I do have my payment links in my bio. Feel free to donate that way, or go to my merch link that's in my bio and purchase a little something, or subscribe here or on Substack. The last thing our ailing campaign needed was rumors of a rift between the president and me. What I didn't know then was that some of his senior staff didn't share that concern. In their own calls trying to quell the rebellion, they'd been talking me down, saying, "If Joe goes, you'll get her," strongly implying that I wasn't up for it. It was just one of the many ways his staff was responding badly to the crisis. They'd started cramming his schedule with more events, knowing full well that when he was tired, he did poorly. Hunter Biden's trial was underway, and I suppose the campaign wanted to distract from that and wanted Joe to be seen as functioning vigorously as president despite the personal burden he was carrying. Instead, they were exhausting him. Whose idea was it to have him stand in the broiling sun at a Juneteenth celebration for 3 hours until, worn out, he was described as comatose? Many people want to spin up a narrative of some big conspiracy at the White House to hide Joe Biden's infirmity. Here is the truth as I lived it. Joe Biden was a smart guy with long experience and deep conviction, able to discharge the duties of president. On his worst day, he was more deeply knowledgeable, more capable of exercising judgment, and far more compassionate than Donald Trump on his best. But at 81, Joe got tired. That's when his age showed in physical and verbal stumbles. I don't think it's any surprise that the debate debacle happened right after 2 back-to-back trips to Europe and a flight to the West Coast for a Hollywood fundraiser. I don't believe it was incapacity. If I believed that, I would have said so. As loyal as I am to President Biden, I am more loyal to my country. What I do know is that he needed rest, and you're not going to get it during a presidential campaign. They don't call it running for office for nothing. Any campaign is full of sprint. A presidential race is sprinting through a marathon. Like a marathon, it is a test of endurance. Unlike a marathon, tomatoes are being thrown at you every step of the way. There was a distinction between his ability to campaign and his ability to govern. I was right beside him as he navigated successfully through intensely dangerous world events. Putin's threat to use tactical nuclear weapons on the Ukraine battlefront. The missiles exchanges between Iran and Israel that might have escalated into regional war if we hadn't rallied the diverse coalition that protected Israel during those attacks. His judgment, his experience, and the relationships he had developed were expertly deployed. As for campaigning, I did have concerns. His voice was no longer strong, his verbal stumbles more frequent. Apart from the superhuman stamina required, communicating is a main game. Before he stepped aside from the top of the ticket, I had planned to do many of the big public rallies and a lot of the crazy travel while his team fashioned a White House-based campaign for him. Even so, his inner circle, the people who knew him best, should have realized that any campaign was a bridge too far, and that in its rigors, he'd be perpetually, increasingly, unavoidably exhausted. They should have counseled him accurately. Instead, it seemed that the worse things got, the more they pushed him. And the more they pushed, the faster and more visibly his energy seemed to drain. I had never, in 3.5 years at the White House, in the Oval Office, or in the Situation Room, witnessed anything remotely like the level of confusion, incoherence, and debility we saw on the debate stage. When Doug and I arrived at the White House on July 4th, I greeted Joe with our usual hug. He was so frail. One of the staff drew Doug aside. The First Lady wanted to speak with him. He was led to the Blue Room, where Jill Biden was standing alone. She seemed tense, even angry. "What's going on?" she demanded. "Are you supporting us?" "Of course," Doug said. "Of course we're supporting you." "Okay, that's really important. We need to know that." When I joined him, Doug was wearing a grim expression. Doug runs cool. He's slow to anger, but I could tell something had gotten to him. Later, he unloaded. "They hide you away for 4 years, give you impossible shit jobs, don't correct the record when those tasks are mischaracterized, never fight back when you're attacked, never praise your accomplishments, and now, finally, they want you out there on that balcony, standing right beside them. Now, finally, they know you are an asset, and they need you to reassure the American people. And still, they ask if we're loyal." July 24th, 104 days to the election. The first stop on the day's calendar had been planned months earlier. At a meeting in the Oval Office discussing her work uplifting Black executives and entrepreneurs, Dr. Stacey N.C. Grant had invited me to address the annual gathering, the grand boule of her sorority, Zeta Phi Beta. Now, I was in Indianapolis, looking out over a convention center packed with 6,000 powerful women in dark blue dresses and white jackets. I'm a member of a different sorority, Alpha Kappa Alpha, the first Black women's Greek letter organization founded at Howard University in 1908. But these women are my sisters too. We're all part of the Divine Nine, the Greek organizations founded when segregation was law in the South and the North, and standard practice in the North. W.E.B. Du Bois and Thurgood Marshall were early members of the first Black fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha, founded at Cornell University in 1906. The Divine Nine had been an engine of uplift for generations of Black college men and women, instilling a love and celebration of excellence, philanthropy, and service to all mankind. My Divine Nine family would show up for me throughout the campaign. The day I was so pleased to see the young president of Phi Beta Sigma, Chris V. Ray, and the esteemed president of Delta Sigma Theta, Elsie Cook Holmes. Throughout my career, I've maintained that people in positions of power must be required to ask themselves, who am I not hearing from? Then make it their business to seek those folks out. I came to the White House knowing that the people in the building needed to hear from a wider range of voices. As vice president, I'd been given several roles by Joe Biden, But one role I created for myself was building up the diverse coalition that our party encompassed. I made it my business to get out there and make sure that no community was overlooked, especially those that had been taken for granted in the past. Black women, the Democrats' staunchest, most reliable voting bloc, was one such community. The Boule in Indianapolis was one of a dozen Divine Nine gatherings I'd addressed since taking office. On this day, there was a new energy in the room as I walked onto the stage. A black woman was slated to be the Democratic nominee for president. It was us. And everyone there understood what it meant, that this would be a journey of both joy and pain. I was in a room full of people whom, because of our shared experience, certain words did not need to be said. There is an emotion that comes from being in a place where people see you, support you, know you. The kindness and the love in that room penetrated the armor I usually wore, armor I'd need to put back on as soon as I left that room. The biggest applause came when I started to say what I would do to restore the rights of Roe v. Wade. When I am president, a roar erupted that drowned out the rest of the sentence. That roar told me they could see it clearly for the first time. This could be and it should be. It was not because of gender or because of race, but despite it. I thought, as I often did, of Shirley Chisholm, and I know they did too. The first black woman elected to the U.S. Congress and the first black woman to run for our party's nomination. She had blazed the path and now I was standing on it. From Indianapolis, we flew on to Houston to meet with emergency management staff and get a briefing on recovery efforts after the devastation of Hurricane Beryl. The Category 1 hurricane's eyewall had slammed Houston, bringing down power lines and leaving vulnerable people without air conditioning or water during triple-digit heat indexes. At least 20 souls had died. The economic damage in the billions was still being reckoned. These kinds of briefings are sadly familiar to me. As DA, I'd witnessed the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. As senator, I'd been to Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria, and I'd toured the communities in my home state that had been ravaged by wildfires. It was heartbreaking to see the scale of these losses and the exhausted faces of individuals standing in the ruins of a lifetime's work, a lifetime's dreams. It was infuriating to see how predators swarmed like cockroaches, price gouging, spreading misinformation. But it was also inspiring to talk to the first responders who ran toward danger, sometimes helping strangers, even as their own homes were at risk. And then there were the regular people who stepped up to help in whatever way they could, collecting toiletries, making sandwiches, organizing clothing drives. In my life, I've seen over and over that it is often the people with the least who give the most. As I shook hands and thanked the police and emergency workers one by one, in each I saw a hero. The kind of person who answered a calling with a sense of duty to the well-being of people they've never met. A reporter in the press pool shouted a question about Biden's upcoming speech. It was just after 5 p.m. in Houston, and the president would be addressing the nation from the Oval Office later that evening. I watched it at the hotel that night. It was a good speech, drawing on the history of the presidency to locate his own place within it. But as my staff later pointed out, it was almost 9 minutes into the 11-minute address before he mentioned me. I want to thank our great Vice President, Kamala Harris. She is experienced. She's tough. She's capable. She's been an incredible partner to me and leader for our country. And that was it. I am a loyal person. During all those months of growing panic, should I have told Joe to consider not running? Perhaps. But the American people had chosen him before in the same matchup. Maybe he was right to believe that they would do so again. He was, by some measures, the most consistently underestimated man in Washington. He'd been right about his tactics for pushing his agenda through a resistant Congress. It was just possible he was right about this too. And all of the people in the White House, I was in the worst position to make the case that he should drop out. I knew it would come off to him as incredibly self-serving if I advised him not to run. He would see it as naked ambition, perhaps as poisonous disloyalty, even if my only message was, don't let the other guy win. It's Joe and Jill's decision. We all said that, like a mantra, as if we'd been hypnotized. Was it grace or was it recklessness? In retrospect, I think it was recklessness. The stakes were simply too high. This wasn't a choice that should have been left to an individual's ego, an individual's ambition. It should have been more than a personal decision. I was well aware of my delicate status. Lore has it that every outgoing chief of staff always tells the incoming president's chief of staff rule number 1, watch the VP. Because I'd gone after him over busing in the 2019 primary debate, I came into the White House with what we lawyers call a rebuttable presumption. I had to prove my loyalty time and time again. When Fox News attacked me on everything from my laugh to my tone of voice to whom I dated in my 20s or claimed I was a DEI hire, the White House rarely pushed back with my actual resume. 2 terms elected DA, top cop in the second largest Department of Justice in the United States, senator representing 1 in 8 Americans. Lorraine, my chief of staff, constantly had to advocate for my role at events. She's not going to stand there like a potted plant. Give her 2 minutes of remarks. Have her introduce the president. They had a huge comms team. They had Karine Jean-Pierre briefing the press room every day. But getting anything positive said about my work or any defense against untrue attacks was almost impossible. An example. In 2021, I was dispatched to the Elysee Palace to help resist our tattered relationship with France after we signed the Australian-UK-US Security Pact. Australia had agreed to buy submarines from France, but scrapped that contract when we and the UK agreed to supply Australia with nuclear subs under the new AUKUS agreement instead. This had caused tremendous friction. In our meeting, Emmanuel Macron and I warmed the chill by focusing on our many areas of cooperation, such as space exploration, climate change, transatlantic security, cybersecurity, the Sahel, and the Indo-Pacific. On that trip, I was invited to visit the renowned Pasteur Institute, where my mother had worked on mRNA research related to breast cancer. I was speaking informally with the scientists there about how I wished politicians would more closely follow the scientific method, testing the hypothesis and adjusting according to results, rather than coming in with a plan as if they had all the answers up front. I said the plan, with exaggerated emphasis and air quotes. Fox News, the New York Post, and Newsmax went wild, claiming I'd faked a French accent. This was total nonsense, but the White House seemed glad to let reporting about my gaffe overwhelm the significant thaw in foreign relations I'd achieved. Worse, I often learned that the president's staff was adding fuel to negative narratives that sprung up around me. One narrative that took a stubborn hold was that I had a chaotic office and unusually high staff turnover during my first year. The plain fact is many people who come to work with a new administration in the White House haven't done it before. It's a job unlike any other, and not every person, no matter how talented in their former position, can step up into such a high-stress, round-the-clock role. Others find they just don't want a job that doesn't pay particularly well, takes a massive toll on family, and rules out anything resembling a normal life. I'm not going to keep people on who can't thrive in their jobs. It's not fair to them, and it's not good for the country. So, the first year in any White House sees staff churn. Working for the first woman vice president, my staff had the additional challenge of confronting gendered stereotypes, a constant battle that could prove exhausting. I was the first vice president to have a dedicated press pool tracking my every public move. Before me, vice president had what's called a supplemental pool, as the first lady does, covering important events. Because of this constant attention, things that had never been especially newsworthy about the vice president were suddenly reported and scrutinized. And when the stories were unfair or inaccurate, the president's inner circle seemed fine with it. Indeed, it seemed as if they decided I should be knocked down a little bit more. The VP should take on irregular migration. From March 2021, my assignment was to attack the root causes of the misery that was driving people from their homes and villages in Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. Because I prosecuted cartels and human traffickers from the Northern Triangle, I was up to speed on the region and its problems, and had ideas about the kinds of investments and other interventions that over time would reduce migration, help to bring more stability, and offer people a safer future in their own community. Most people don't want to leave home. They don't want to leave their grandmother, their church, their friends, their language. And when they do, it is usually for one of two reasons. They fear for their lives, or they can't make a living. Much of that region is rural, and farmers are increasingly hit by climate events such as floods and droughts. If you can no longer grow food where you are, and if there's no other livelihood, you will leave, because there's simply no choice. Corruption and gangs thrive when there are limited resources. When Republicans mischaracterized my role as border czar, no one in the White House comms team helped me effectively push back and explain what I had really been tasked to do, nor to highlight any of the progress I had achieved. I won commitments of $5.2 billion in new investments by private companies for the region. I had already seen almost $1 billion of that money deployed, thanks to enthusiastic partners such as MasterCard, Microsoft, and Nespresso. I held numerous bilateral meetings, with leaders throughout the region, especially President Alejandro Gimenete. In Guatemala, and later his successor, President Bernardo Arevalo, I had multiple calls with Gimenete warning him that I expected free and fair elections, sending my national security advisor, Phil Gordon, to reinforce the message in person and publicly supporting Arevalo once the election was called. I met with activist groups fighting corruption and for human rights in El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. Cabinet members pitched in. Tom Vilsack at the Department of Agriculture assessed resources to train farmers in the latest methods to increase yields. I worked closely with Mexico's president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, and his successor, President Claudia Sheinbaum, on our mutual border concerns. The investment I was bringing was a bargaining chip with regional governments to crack down on corrosive levels of corruption. These American companies, I told them, would not invest unless real steps were taken. The investments I encourage have connected communities to the internet and brought people onto the formal financial system, creating jobs and opportunity. And that's just one of many examples of soft power. And the removal and dismantling of USAID hurts farmers here and farmers globally, which causes more irregular migration into the United States. So you cannot say you don't want immigrants/migrants in the country, but you keep removing what would keep them in their countries and what would allow us soft power in other countries. In the locations where I was able to bring new enterprises and greater stability, data showed it was working. Our investments had created 70,000 new jobs, reached over 1 million people with training programs, and connected 2.5 million previously unbanked people with banking services access to credit. These people were staying put. I wanted to get that good news out. But White House staff stalled. Not yet. We need more data. The story remained untold. Instead, I shouldered the blame for the porous border, an issue that had proved intractable for Democratic and Republican administrations alike. And it's because of racism and white supremacy that people tend to focus on one border. The United States does not have just one border. We have borders flanked by land and we have borders flanked by sea. And the most open of the borders is at the southern border. And we've been building this wall since Reagan. The first portions of the border wall came due to Reagan. A lot of things are being resurrected, dug up if you would, and attempted to being resuscitated from the Reagan era, as if that was such a great era. Instead, I shouldered the blame for the porous border, an issue that had proven intractable for Democratic and Republican administrations alike. Even the breathtaking cruelty of Trump's family separation policy hadn't deterred the desperate. It was an issue that absolutely demanded bipartisan cooperation at an impossibly partisan, most uncooperative time. No one around the president advocated. Give her something she can win with. Then the Dobbs decision came down. Here was a huge issue on which the president was not seeking to lead. Joe struggled to talk about reproductive rights in a way that met the gravity of the moment. He ceded that leadership to me. I initiated a national tour and rallied the outrage in red states and blue states alike. As well as big public events, I convened roundtables, starting out with 10 or 12 state legislators whom I would connect with resources in the Justice Department or Health and Human Services. Soon, advocates started attending, then healthcare providers, then families affected by restrictive laws. There would be hundreds of people at these meetings building a national coalition. All this work upended the narrative that we were doomed to a shellacking in the midterms. We defied historical precedent because of our efforts on this issue. Since 1934, the president's party has lost an average of 28 House seats and 4 Senate seats in the midterm elections. We lost 9 seats in the House and retained control of the Senate. This is a good example and a reminder. You don't have to tell melanated people that no one is on our side. We know that there is yet to be a political party that is not going to use us. We are tasked with choosing the political party that's going to use us the least. Kamala Harris, it appears, was chosen as a safety net for Joe Biden. We can keep Joe, or you're going to be stuck with her, as if she is what goes bump in the night, instead of fighting what actually goes bump in the night. Joe was already polling badly on the age issue, with roughly 75% of voters saying he was too old to be an effective president. Then he started taking on water for his perceived blank check to Benjamin Netanyahu in Hessa. When polls indicated that I was getting more popular, the people around him didn't like the contrast that was emerging. But it was okay for him to gain popularity while he was the second to Obama. Keep in mind, I think people forget the duality that comes with being a black woman. You're not just hated for your race, your ethnicity. You're also hated for your gender and your ability to increase intellectually. You're constantly told to do better, and when you do better, you're criticized for it. Because they want you to do better, just not better than them. And you have to walk a tightrope. Because you need to be able to come in and do 50% of this and contribute 50% of that, when in reality they want you to do 100% but look like you're giving 0%. In Selma, Alabama, at the commemoration of Bloody Sunday, when civil rights marchers were attacked and beaten once they'd crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge, I gave a strong speech on the humanitarian crisis in Hessa. Desperate people had been shot when they swarmed a food truck, and I spoke of families reduced to eating leaves or animal feed, women prematurely giving birth with little or no medical care, and children dying from malnutrition and dehydration. I reiterated my strong support for Israel's security and called on Hamas to release the hostages and accept the ceasefire agreement then on the table. I also called on Israel for greater access to aid. It was a speech that had been vetted and approved by the White House and the National Security Council. It went viral, and the West Wing was displeased. I was castigated for, apparently, delivering it too well. Their thinking was zero sum. If she's shining, he's dimmed. None of them grasped that if I did well, he did well. See, that divide happened before the ballot box, before she became the nominee. They forgot that they were on the same team, that they were on the same ticket. They forgot one band, one sound. None of them, that, given the concerns about his age, my visible success as his vice president was vital. It would serve as a testament to his judgment in choosing me and reassert assurance that if something happened, the country was in good hands my success was important for him. But his team didn't get it. Let's see how. Okay. This one isn't too long. We will do one more tonight, and then we'll stick a pin in it, and we will reconvene again tomorrow. As always, once this is done and it goes through the processes, I will download it, and then I will upload onto YouTube if you missed any parts of this. If you missed, once again, unfortunately, gifting is currently suspended. But if you want to tip to help keep things going, my payment links are in the bio, or you can click the merch link and purchase there, or subscribe here or on Substack. July 25th, 103 days to the election. Your entry has electrified this race, said Randi Weingarten, president of the American Federation of Teachers. Her union had been the first to endorse me in an announcement on July 22nd. We were waiting backstage at the Houston Convention Center, where I was to speak to more than 3,000 teachers gathered for their annual convention. We could hear the crowd chanting, call and response, "Kamala Harris!" I took the stage to a standing ovation. Again, I led with Joe. So last night, our president addressed the nation, and he showed once again what true leadership looks like, I said. And over his entire career, Joe has led with grace and strength and bold vision and deep compassion. In the meat of my speech, I hit our key policy differences with Republicans. We want to ban assault weapons, and they want to ban books. I gave teachers the love they so deserved. These dedicated, underpaid professionals who change lives. I spoke of the teacher who changed mine, my first grade teacher, Mrs. Wilson, the remarkable woman who stayed in my life and showed up for my law school graduation. Afterward, the motorcade drove to the airport through a downpour, water running across the highway and cataracts. It made me concerned for Houston, for the impact of the next borough and the next hurricane after that. Concerned for all the great American cities and communities under threat from the weather disasters made more frequent and more intense by climate change. Everyone who said we couldn't afford to make the necessary changes to achieve net zero carbon emissions didn't seem to grasp that we couldn't afford not to. What sort of American economy would we have in a future where even Wall Street itself could be drowned by rising water? I had been the deciding vote for the Inflation Reduction Act, which was the most consequential climate bill ever enacted into law. My senior policy advisor, Ike Irby, is a climate scientist. It's an issue about which I am passionate, and one on which the U.S. president needs to lead. Part of the challenge with this very short campaign was that we had to focus on needs that felt more immediate, like how to deal with the grocery bill or the cost of childcare. Talking about the benefits that would flow from our green energy investments was too distant. We had offered generous rebates to low and middle income families to help them install heat pumps and other energy efficient appliances that would lower emissions and utility bills, but people hadn't yet had a chance to feel those savings. It was hard to get people excited about the prospect of much lower utility bills in the future, that the battery technologies we'd invested in would be cheap enough for every home to make and store its own power from sunlight. People were focused on the cost of things today. I needed to emphasize that I had plans that would swiftly lower the cost of housing, that would stop price gouging, Climate policy was a much longer, more complicated conversation. It had to include explaining our plans for a just transition, one that wouldn't leave workers employed in the fossil fuel economy behind. I knew that 1 in 5 voters and an even higher percentage of younger voters identified as being very concerned about climate change. On my college tour, young people had spoken frankly to me of climate anxiety. Their fear that my generation's failure to act was robbing them of a healthy planet, a healthy future. I knew I risked leaving those voters on the table by not talking more about this issue. In this short campaign, I just didn't have time. I had to triage issues so that key information could sink in. Sometimes I felt like the triage nurse who makes the call in the pit. Each one of those souls is important, but with the limited resources you have, you must choose among them. It was frustrating that I had to leave so much out, but as the advertising industry has long known, people must hear the same message 3 times before it even starts to penetrate. After the exhilaration of being with the teachers, people I greatly admired, I was heading to a meeting with Netanyahu, about whom I was more ambivalent. What I'm not ambivalent about is Israel's security. As a young girl, I carried around a little blue box for the Jewish National Fund, soliciting support to plant trees in Israel. I believe Israel was right to respond to the atrocities of October 7th. Girl, don't make me hate you. Don't make me cuss you out. Don't. We read and we only judge a little bit. But the ferocity of Netanyahu's response, the number of innocent Palestinian women and children killed, and his failure to prioritize the lives of hostages had weakened Israel's moral position internationally and created angry dissent within Israel itself. So we're just going to ignore the attack from Israel on Palestine just a few months before in April. People like me who understand the importance of a Jewish homeland, who value Israel as a democracy and as an ally, sincerely believe that the scale of the response and the denial of food and medical supplies to civilians were doing Israel grave harm. I'd been on almost every phone call between the president and Netanyahu since October 7th. Soon after the pogrom, I met with the distraught parents of American hostages. Many in Israel feared that Netanyahu's priority was his own political survival and not the desperate predicament of the captive children. Of course, it was his political survival and him staying out of jail, because I think too many people forget that he's still on trial. He's still on trial. And for those that are like, well, God had a covenant with the Jews and he promised them, y'all do realize that that covenant was made with Christian Jews, not the entirety of the Jewish diaspora. You do realize that even in the Bible, if you're going by that text, there were different sects of Jews. Why would a God that they do not see as their God, their deity, make a covenant with them and make such promises? And Israel became the church. The church was when Israel, Christian Jews, combined with Gentiles in their faith in Jesus the Christ. But if you're going to ascribe to Zionism and Christian nationalism, facts really don't matter. Paying attention to the doctrine doesn't matter, You're absolutely right. God didn't say to do that. And given that they chose that plot of land from a list of things in a love letter, once again, you can check out my breakdown of how we got to where we got to on YouTube. Yeah. Oh, yes. That alternative facts. Absolutely. Absolutely. I was trying to think of how to describe it. You described that Absolutely correct. And Lexa, you're on point as usual. And for those that don't know, yes, I read to people online because, like I said, everybody cannot afford to get all these books as they come out. And I love books, but I'm also a historian. So. I had low expectations for our bilateral meeting. It was important to demonstrate our continuing support for our longtime ally, especially after such an atrocious attack. You mean our stepchild? Because we act like a creepy boy mom. We do. We act like a creepy boy mom. Okay? Yeah. We do. We act like we're the mother of Brock Turner. We act like we are the affluenza mama. It was also critical to show that we were continuing to press our plan for a ceasefire that would bring the hostages home to their families and spare innocent Palestinian civilians. I'm going to stick a pin in here real quick. Just real quick. Throughout the campaign and throughout her service as vice president, far too many people blamed her husband, Doug, as to why she had the views that she has regarding Palestine and Israel, etc. I need y'all to stop doing that. I'm not saying that spouses cannot influence spouses, but y'all do that more when it comes to women. You automatically assume that some man is influencing them, that some man is telling them what to think. She said that as a child, she carried these beliefs. Agree with it, don't agree with it. You heard my knee-jerk response. Like I said, this book just came out. I'm reading it with y'all in real time. I didn't pre-read anything. I didn't read ahead. We reading this right on along together. But I need y'all to stop doing this. Stop putting the onus of a woman's decisions and a woman's views on whatever man is in her life. Stop doing that. Because y'all put so much, and you want women to carry the weight of the world until it's time for a woman to carry her decisions. The consequences and accountability for her decisions, her words, and her rhetoric. If I say something off the cuff, don't blame my daddy, don't blame my brothers, don't blame my significant other. Hold me accountable. I said it. I did it. And she just said she's held these views regarding Israel since a child. Didn't matter who she married, who she got with, no nothing. That man didn't have nothing to do with it. Now, we may find out later that they had conversations, but she's held these views since a child. If you don't agree with those views, don't agree with her. Don't drag anybody else into the conversation. You get what I'm putting down? I don't absolve anybody from accountability. I can agree with you on 99 things, but if I feel that you're wrong on that 100th, I'm not going to do it. And you should do the same with me. Okay? Help me help you. Okay? And I'm going to help you help me. Are we here? Okay? Yeah, I explained that. We can have influence over one another, but we can't we can't assume that because somebody identifies as female, that they're being walked through life without the ability to make their own decisions. And influence doesn't mean that you have to do the thing. You know. Trust me, I'm a prime example. My siblings will all get together and do some stuff, and I'm like, I don't care how many times y'all call me, and I don't care how much DNA we share. I absolutely no. But that's just me. Being the only girl, I learned how to no. No, not assuming. That's why I said hold people accountable for what they say. Don't attribute what they do or say to somebody else, especially when they're a woman. Because it always comes up when a woman says or does something problematic. Oh, her husband got her to do that. Her father did. No, she made that decision. She's just a horrible person. She just had a horrible take. Like I said, if I have a horrible take or I do something disrespectful, that's nobody else's fault. That's my fault. It doesn't matter the content that I consume. It doesn't matter the conversations that I have with people. I made that decision. Hold me accountable. Don't look for somebody else to take the blame for me. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. Don't shift the blame. Yeah, he does seem like a very sweet person. I think that he's the type that he has his views and he will respect the views that you have. And like she described him, he's slow to anger. He's slow to speak. He's slow to do all these things. So, but as I stepped off Air Force 2 at Joint Base Andrews, I was forced back into campaign mode. Trump, being Trump, had backed off his willingness to stick to the September 10th debate he'd agreed to. He'd been rubbing his hands at the prospect of another round with Joe. Now that it's with me, he suddenly wasn't so keen. I stood under the wing on the tarmac and told the assembled reporters, "You have been asking me about the debate, and I'll tell you, I'm ready to debate Donald Trump. I have agreed to the previously agreed upon September 10th debate. He agreed to that previously. Now, here he is backpedaling. I'm ready, and I think the voters deserve to see the split screen that exists in this race on the debate stage." What the Israeli Prime Minister do at my ceremonial office in the Eisenhower Executive Office Building, I walked to the waiting SUV without taking questions. I met Netanyahu in the vast, beautiful space containing Teddy Roosevelt's mahogany desk. The inside of the top drawer had been signed by every vice president since the 1940s. I need y'all to stop this tradition. Y'all are destroying historic artifacts all up and through D.C. You got staffers all throughout Capitol Hill destroying pieces of furniture from the 17 and 1800s. Even historical parts of the... Stop doing this shit. We know who you are. We got plenty of history and photographs of you motherfuckers in your position. Stop. Stop. If y'all keep doing this, I'm going to get a coalition of people and we're going to start signing your ancestors' graves. See how you like that. Quit doing it. Y'all do realize that when you do these things, it does not help with the preservation process. You wonder why we can't teach proper history now. We got goofies that think that chattel slavery didn't exist because we're the slave ships. Stop. Stop. It is an eloquent testimony to national pride in the peaceful transfer of power through the years. No, the fuck it's not. No, it's not. Okay, it's graffiti. I'm tired of y'all renaming things and giving one thing 20 different names. And some of the names, oh, it's historic, it's tradition. And then other names, it's criminal. Stop. Graffiti is graffiti is graffiti. Stop it. Let's not. Sorry, that's the historian in me. So sorry. That is the historian / the mama in me. Now, as the cool auntie, slide me an edible and a little drinky drink, I ain't see nothing. I'll get the bail money from your parents in the morning. Oh, yeah. And ever since I started teaching through homeschool collaboratives, ooh. Now, I have been fortunate this time around to be with some collaboratives that they came together because they realized their children were being underserved in traditional schools, public, private, parochial. I've been tutoring since my sophomore year in high school. And I even teach adults. And you're, yeah. Maybe tomorrow we'll sit down and have a conversation on the disparities and the differences in that. And if anybody wants to come up and join me, we can do that. I think, yeah. I think tomorrow before we dive into the book, I think maybe we should do that. Maybe we should chit chat. Maybe we can put our collective heads together and maybe find a way that we all can help, how we can help one another and help the community at large. And by community, I'm talking about the community of humanity. for those that are new. I like to, let people know the definitions behind the verbiage that I use. I am not exclusionary around here. I am very much so inclusionary. So if you see this face, I'm including you, okay? And once you hit that follow button, we cousins now. Keep in mind, I'm the cousin that brings snacks in my purse. Take one and be quiet. Don't be snitching and don't make a whole bunch of noise, okay? We ain't trying to spend the whole time in the corner. But we will be spending some time in the corner. But you're not going down. We're going to have fun, okay? Just...
Yes, hey, Aaron, yes, my cuddle buddy. You're real.
Okay, we gotta... I know I said I was going to go all the way through this, but I'm going to go to the end of this paragraph, and we're going to stick a pin in this, and then we'll start back up tomorrow because I do need to grab something to eat. As I said before, make sure you check me out on Rouse High Exalted tonight. And if you're not following my good brother, Star-Lord, a.k.a. Dave the Viking, make sure you do so. Make sure you do so. And make sure you check out all the wonderful, wonderful shows on GCPR Radio. Especially, Aaron, where you at? Aaron, say hey, so people can follow you and they can check out you and Anger IT Nerds show as well. Hi, Harley. Hi. Plus, I need to take somebody out. Hey, cousin. Take somebody else so she can potty so I can get something to eat. So we're going to do this last paragraph and then we'll go through. Tomorrow we will start at, what's tomorrow, Thursday? Tomorrow we'll start at 6 Central. No, we'll start at 5 Central because we do still have Teos Chat tomorrow. So we'll start at 5 Central. Oh, always, Aaron. That's what we do around here. I try to sprinkle the shout outs all through. So yeah. And like I said, we will begin tomorrow with the conversation on education. So if anybody wants to pop up before we dive into the book, we will. Girly Pop, you're moving the ottoman, the table. Hold on. Okay, I'm gonna let you out. Okay, so I didn't. I know how to tell time. Thank you. I'm gonna read the paragraph and then I'm gonna let you out. Okay. Netanyahu's hooded gaze and disengaged demeanor made it clear to me that he was running out the clock. He denied Gazans were starving and blamed Hamas for looting food. I interrupted to reiterate the need for an immediate ceasefire and a day-after plan that gave Palestinians some kind of political horizon. Netanyahu wanted only a temporary ceasefire to get hostages back, but did not want to end the war. It was clear that nothing would be accomplished. We'd outlined the terms of negotiation for the ceasefire back in May and made frustratingly little progress with either Israel or Hamas. Y'all do realize BB from Philly doesn't care because his son has been a Florida man this whole time. What do I mean? He sent his son, not to Philly, but he sent his talents to Miami. So that's what we have for now. Like I said, keep in mind, I have been getting mass reported, so it may take a while. For those that normally go live, you know that TikTok will tell you like, oh, it passed approval or passed something, and then they'll make it available. I will download it and then I will put it up on YouTube. Keep in mind, anything over an hour does take a while. Because those of y'all who don't know, I'm kind of in a back and forth. Well, it's a one-sided beef. Sean Hannity don't like me, and I like to ignore him. But he also likes to hit me with copyright infringements because I don't talk about him. Well, I guess now I will be on YouTube because this is going on there. So it might take a little bit. But it will be up there, and then we will begin tomorrow. Like I said, in a little bit, check me out on Rouse High Exalted. I need to go get something to eat and get elevated. Like giraffe nostrils, how I normally am. And tonight, for those of you all that also watch my podcast on Talk About It Tuesday for Conversations with Taz, Bree Wilson, aka the Controversial Blonde, will be on talking about her campaign down in Georgia. Because y'all remember little Miss White Lady, Tori, that was like, yeah, I called about Hyundai, which was a lie. And Bree was like, bet, this is what you want to do? I got an answer for you. Yes. So we're all going to be there. We're going to be high. I am, of course, going to put my journalistic hat on and, I guess, interview my friend. And before y'all go, Taz, you're always interviewing a friend. I got a lot of friends, okay? I'm a good friend to have. I bring snacks. I bring hugs. I bring smiles, okay? And also, note to note, the anti-racism journaling, I finished everything. I got all of the artwork, which I put together myself, all done. I am just having a problem submitting it through the portal that they gave me to submit it. So I do not have an official date to say that you could pre-order it. I'm going to try to work this out in the next couple days to give you information. So I'm getting frustrated. So Aaron, if you're still in here, I may need to lean on you tomorrow because it might just be my frustration. So there we have it. But as always, each one teach one, each one reach one. Go out, get into some good trouble, or pop a gummy. Or flip the bean. That's my life advice. And unfortunately, those that we thought were going to be raptured, they wasn't raptured. But otherwise, I will see you all tomorrow. Thank you for joining me. Be good, y'all.